Hey everybody, welcome back to your Full Crew podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, one of your co-hosts.
And I'm Mike Peel, your other co-host. Want to thank our sponsors today, DroneUp, SAIC, FIXAR, and Rubric Law for making this episode possible. We're going to be talking about some great articles today. We're going to be dispelling some AI myths. We're going to be talking about some actual cool AI with liquid neural networks and what they can mean for drones. We're going to get some insights from 13 VCs on robotics investments. And then we're going to cap the show off with the expanding industry of humanoid robotics. And we've got some fantastic guests to talk about these topics today. I'm going to start with Yulia. Yulia, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. So I'm Yulia. I'm co-founder of FIXAR, a Latvian developer of autonomous drones with best-in-class economic efficiency. So I have my background in VC world, and I brought all my experience to run FIXAR global expansion team. And so still enjoy this extremely fascinating space.
Well, we're happy to have you here. Oh, got some extra audio coming in. So we also have Casey from Aero Vigilance. Casey, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Casey Flanagan, co-founder of Aero Vigilance. We are a counter-UAS consulting, training, and services company from a neutral and agnostic point of view. We are not anti-drone. We are about the safe integration of drones into the airspace. Also co-creator of CUAS Hub, which is an industry resource website for counter-UAS and airspace awareness. And my background is former federal law enforcement, working in the counter-UAS space on the team, protecting mass gatherings and doing investigations related to drones.
Well, I want to thank you both for this is actually your second appearance on a Crew Network show. So we had Yulia on the Full Tilt a couple of weeks ago for, I think, National Women's Month or Women History Month, Dawn? Yes. That was a great interview. And then also Casey and his business partner were on the Dawn of Drones not too long ago. So be sure to check out those episodes on their relevant channels. So first up today, we're going to be talking about an article from Jaron Lanier, who is known as the father of virtual reality. Recently, he's actually taken a lot of flack for his position probably about a decade ago on Web 2.0 and open source in general that kind of put him on the outs of the technorati, if we'll call them that. Now, I normally don't talk about, the background of a writer on an article because usually it's the quality of their ideas, but I think it provides important context for Jaron's viewpoint here. One of the things he's saying is that the way that many people in Silicon Valley are treating AI is almost religiously. I think one of the lines he uses in the article is they're hosting vigils for the singularity in Starbucks and cafes. And he takes a kind of what is a traditional engineer's viewpoint, almost the world is dead. This is just a tool. So, and I think he does make a very, very good case for why treating it not like a tool actually is going to let you use it less efficiently. And then also going to lead to some negative kind of emotional outcomes for users that aren't quite necessary if you treat it as a tool first. Another concept he brings up in this article, and it actually is an evolution of kind of his commentary on Web 2.0, is the idea of data dignity. So just because something can be learned by these massive models doesn't mean that the original creator should just abdicate all of the value of their work that they put into society. And that's kind of what was the cry from artists that we heard months ago when we really started first addressing these AI issues on the show. And one of the things that we brought up in that episode was ChatGPT, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion aren't properly sourcing their inputs. And ironically enough, I opened up Midjourney last week, and if you use the describe feature, it'll tell you the artist and provide a link to that artist's Wikipedia article, which means it was always accessible and very easy for the models to draw out. And I think what Jaron is saying about data dignity, it flows from this. We should be able to opt in to receiving credit for the work that we put into this shared social experience tool, this social creativity tool. So very, very deep stuff, normally deeper and more philosophical than we get, but I just thought it was one of the best viewpoints on AI tech that I've heard, especially since I've personally experienced engineers treating this thing like it's the Star Trek computer. So, Yulia, you want to give some of your input on it?
Oh yeah, well, first of all, that's a great piece, and thanks for sharing. Very, very insightful article. And well, it's as the author of this article said, we definitely can be sure where it leads with AI. But I want to be positive about all this innovations, and that reminds me about how, like, the new technologies, technology cycles adoption we saw in the past. Whatever appears first, the first reaction is fear, and then it penetrates, you want it or not, and then it evolves, and then democratization starts, and it's great. It's getting more affordable for everyone, and this cycle, depending on the technology, takes between 30 and 40 years, 30, 35, 40 years. Like with the cars, with the computers, with smartphones, and so on. So with the planes, the same. So yeah, first that's the fear, then weak penetration, as I said, and the same scenarios we saw with the, as I mentioned, the planes, when at the very beginning they were available for extremely wealthy people, and then it became democratization of the technology and affordable for the mass market. And I'm also one of those techies who says that in the coming years, people who work with AI will be more productive and will find new types of jobs in the productive economy. So the AI and they're supposed to take the technical job for work from us, to have more space for some creativity, for more intellectual job, etc. So that's I believe we should focus on. Yeah, whereas the AI should take more routine job to take care of. So that's the first thoughts.
Yeah, I think thinking of these tools as a ladder is very productive, right? You will get the most use out of them that way, and you actually won't self-limit what you can create with them. If you think that it's going to be doing all the thinking for you, then kind of what's the point of even asking the question? So that's what I've found when I use it, or when and in fact, the most useful AIs for me tend to be something like GitHub Copilot, which are very specific to the creative task you're working on, removing the drudgery rather than putting all the onus on me to ask you these deep questions and get a response. So Casey, what's your thoughts?
I think I mean, first of all, the title, there is no AI. I mean, that just gets to the point, and something that I've kind of professed that, especially in my world where emerging technologies and counter UAS and like the new technologies for analyzing signals from drones, for doing camera analytics, that kind of thing, AI gets thrown around a lot for the marketing buzz, right?
Yeah, totally different context too, right? Like,
totally different context. And it's challenging to have real conversations about the technical aspect of equipment and what it's actually doing when people are like, oh, it's AI. It's just doing this in the background. Mm-hmm. And so you almost rely on that to explain things away. And I think that spells trouble in some regard. So understanding that like AI is just a tool, and maybe a more descriptive term that is better for those lay people who aren't actually involved with coding artificial intelligence and understanding the machine learning aspects of it and the different iterations you have to go through. Having a more descriptive process about what is actually happening behind the scenes could help kind of explain some of that away. But also it's just like every tool, there's a little bit of time that things need to catch up to regulation. I mean, vehicles, cars were tools. I mean, at their base level, they're tools, right? Now we use them for enjoyment, but when they started out, there were no rules and regulations. People were driving around they made their roads, right? They didn't really care about safety of the vehicle, safety on the road, safety of other people, but all of that had to get put in place as we learned more about them. So I think we're kind of in that hard gray transition phase right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring up vehicles, and I'll pass it off to Don. I just want to bring up this little nugget from history. Term jaywalker was basically lobbied for by the automotive industry. So Jays were like bums in New York City, and if you crossed the path of the car, now you were committing a crime. So
that's so interesting. Yeah,
Wow.
put it on the people walking than instead of the vehicles. That's
those terrible
That is
Jays. So what were you going to say, Don?
Yeah, well, you know, words matter, and we've talked about this before. And in fact, Casey, I think great, you know, case in point, you know, counter drone people, you had to explain we're not actually against drones, right? So that term right there is probably not an awesome term that we need to be using, just like this article explains. And by the way, Casey and Tom Adams as partner, you know, kind of more widely using, you know, airspace awareness and protection, which frankly is the better way to describe what it is people are doing and what they're doing. You know, so this idea about artificial intelligence almost becoming a sentient being that is going to annihilate the human race. You know, we've given it that power through words. You know, we're using terms like hallucinating, right? We're saying the AI has hallucinated when it gives us a really stupid, bad, crazy answer, right? But that's a human function. And so when you start kind of putting these terms onto the tech, you see why then it lends itself to people thinking this thing is alive, it's real, when it's not. As Jaron says so well, this is about mathematics, you know, which give it flexibility. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's just snarfing up, you know, human creation and mashing it together, for lack of a better term, honestly. Speaking of terms, I love his data dignity concept. And I think this, to Casey's point, is where law, regulation, policy have to catch up with the AI. You know, we're going to see a lot of, we're already hearing buzz in the intellectual property sector of, you know, people saying, hold on a minute, that was my work, you're putting it over here, I'm not getting money for it. And it would be so great to sort this out before the courts have to, right?
Yeah.
Like what, and Mike, I didn't know that that one group already is kind of at least somewhat attributing information
Oh
to
yeah,
a particular.
that was a recent drop, like, because I
creator.
used the tool, so I saw it, you know.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And then my final point is this, you know, that is all about transparency. And in so many areas, when you're talking about tools, transparency is so critical to understand what is going on. I think the best example he gave, which had tragic and fatal consequences for a lack of transparency in technology, was the Boeing 737 crash incidents, where, you know, the training, the information, all those pilots had been given was counterintuitive. And so when things started going wrong, they went to, you know, their muscle memory of what tasks they should be doing, which were exactly the opposite of what needed to be done given the programming and the technology that had been injected into those jets. And so they didn't know it. They were actually doing the right thing. But if you don't know what's in that black box, as Jaron says, then danger, 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 right? So you can see where, you know, he makes some so really, really valid points throughout this article.
You know, that's interesting you bring up the 737 thing, because that was not a complicated algorithm. That was basically something that was intelligently adjusting based on feedback. So like you said, if you pushed down or pulled up, it was trying to overcompensate if that had reached like a threshold. But like with the AI stuff, the model is technically deterministic. It's just that the model is so large, you can't possibly test all the deterministic outcomes. And if that's the case, then that tool should have legal restrictions for how it could be used. Or there should be a warning label, like, don't use it for this and expect the right answer. In fact, they do. But it could be, you know, it could get really, really bad fast if people use it incorrectly. But actually, so I'm going to move over to the more technical side of this issue so people could have a better understanding. And this is thanks to Casey supplying us an article about a new neural network called liquid neural nets. I'm actually going to take us down the page a little bit just so people can see it. But Casey, tell us a little bit about your article.
Yeah, so full disclaimer, I am not an MIT level brain, so I'm going to try to break it down as best as I can in my layman's terms. So the liquid neural networks are kind of modeling on how a human brain works. You know, we are the most advanced species we know of right now, so let's try and model what we've already seen and kind of the synapses that happen between our neurons and, you know, all that stuff in our brain. And so they are leveraging this somewhat like constant learning version of liquid neural networks. So it's a form of AI, as I understand it, that you know, traditional AI models, they learn and train, and then they apply that training, but they don't consistently learn during their inputs and their outputs, and there's no feedback mechanism there. So this helps with that and keeps constant information flow for that additional training. And then they're using it here in this scenario, in this article, for navigation of the environment for drones, which has unbelievable kind of implications for the use and evolution of how we use drones for disaster response, for firefighting, for drone first responder, for just deliveries. I mean, I'm of the opinion that drones delivering items to people is probably the most base function they can do, besides just taking pictures for people from a hobby perspective, right? They can do so much more, from counting trees for reforestation efforts to actually planting those seedlings if needed, you know, and then doing all of this great survey work and agricultural. So in the application of like a disaster response, using these liquid neural networks and kind of this navigation ability, they are able to, you know, kind of ingest the data as they see it. So say a huge tornado went through, and so they're scanning that tornado for, you know, potential signs of life, if they, where they need to get disaster recovery efforts, but there's downed trees. And so this drone is able to navigate those challenges on its own without human input. And that is a huge force multiplier for already strapped emergency responders, right? And they are having challenges manning those front lines for disaster response already. So let's leverage technology and let's move that forward. But an additional implication of this is the nefarious use of this technology. And so right now in counter drone, you can detect drones by their signal. That's the control link, or you can detect them via physical means, radar, acoustic, camera analytics, but something that can navigate without GPS and without RF signals makes it imperative that you start employing those physical detection techniques.
Yeah, because it's not squawking, right? So
right. There's no signal transmission to intercept. So how do you detect that drone?
Interesting. Yulia, what's your take?
Well, sounds like that's the self-learning systems, and applications are unlimited, as Casey said. Well, from the VC perspective, I would say go and get funding to prove that technology in the real environment, not only in laboratory tests. I'm just curious how much time that would need the MIT group to bring it to the market. I believe that's the technology level, and then to bring it from the tech level to solution and the product level, that takes a lot of budget normally, because we are talking about the deep tech. It's not that's the science-based technology, and that normally requires the deep pockets investors to back all this R&D, to polish it, to make it sellable, and proof for the different types of environment. But like from the OEM perspective, that sounds as a breakthrough technology. And I believe a lot of the drone developers would love to try it out and test it. And yeah, we would love to be a part of this, basically.
Yeah, you know, getting back to that theme of words matter, honestly, Casey, I'm not an MIT level technologist either by any means. And I had to look up words because, you know, they just, hey, you know, liquid neural networks, like everybody that read that thing knew what that was. And so I literally looked up, well, number one, what's a neural network? As you said, it's a subset of machine learning. It's the heart of a deep learning algorithm. What's a recurrent neural network? It's this artificial neural network that's commonly used in speech recognition, language processing. And a liquid neural network is a form of a recurrent neural network where the network learns continuously as new data is fed in. So that was my research yesterday. Now everybody else knows, but none of that was in the article. So thank you so much, MIT press group, because I think you lost a lot of people from sentence one. But I agree with you. Really, really cool applications, and the implications are significant. You were talking about a lot of commercial use cases, Casey, but think about on the battlefield, because there's been a lot of discussion around the policy for autonomous vehicles in war. How does the law of war accommodate for that? Should we be allowing machines to make decisions or dynamically do things? Man, this could really change the game. And so, as we were talking about before, I think hitting that fast forward button on policy making, regulations, because this is here. Like, Yulia, to your point, this might be occurring in a lab, but it's just a matter of time before they get VC funding. And now all of a sudden people are putting this out in the real world. And, what is it exactly does that mean? And then Casey, of course, on your side of the fence, and how do you protect against those that would use it in a nefarious way, right? So you have to look at any of this holistically, not only the technology, but okay, what are the nth degree applications of this? What's the policy regulation that needs to be applied? And what happens when people do bad things with it? How do we deal with that? So, a lot of things to think about here. Really cool stuff, though.
Yeah, Don, go, Casey.
So one thing that I'm really interested in from the VC point of view is laws and regulations in enabling kind of the confidence of VCs to get involved with projects like this. Because what we see in the counter world is we are stalled with laws and regulations that are applied towards counter technologies. So only 4 federal entities in the United States can actually do full counter UAS. So there's a lot of hesitancy from VCs to get involved with counter technology because they're not sure if it's going to continue that regulation. So that's something I'd like to hear from Yulia on.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Your thoughts on VCs, or how regulation plays into investment strategies, et cetera.
Oh, yeah. Well, regulations are normally considered by VC as the obstacles to penetrate to the market, for sure. And of course, that's the first question when it comes to the science-based technology, whether it's regulated or not. So for sure, any type of the limitations and regulatory barriers would bring the additional thought for the VC table to consider to go on or not with this deal. But at the same time, the VC world sees this not for the first time, when the regulatory actually not only brings some limitations, but also opens up even more opportunities and more use cases on the market. So that's the situation, I believe, when the different communities should work together, and they do. Basically, the OEM, the universities, and the government, creating this conversation between them to finally kind of develop the agreement how it should work. So the regulators do not always have the deep understanding of the technology. That's why they basically come to the, let's say, developers or OEM side to learn, okay, how these detect and avoid systems work, or what about the neural networks, etc., to get this idea of how it can be or cannot be regulated and what they can do to protect people. First of all, that's the goal of all the regulators, and and on the flip side, to bring the technology that should basically serve the society and the market. So it's kind of two-way street as I see it. So it's always kind of conversation when it comes to the new technology.
Yeah, just to hop off of that a little bit, one of the kind of understated goals of regulations is to create a fair environment for everybody to compete. So I wouldn't imagine VCs would ever take the position that they want the environment completely fair because they want an unfair advantage for their own success, right? But in the drone industry, that really panned out because one, if you couldn't prove the thing was safe, you couldn't get mass market adoption. And then also, you can't generate something that's going to compete with the current airspace from scratch. That just didn't pan out. And if they had looked at the history, they probably would have known that actually the space is already regulated. You can't claim that it doesn't need new regulations. It actually does need new regulations, or else it won't even open up to you. That's kind of what we saw. I want to bring in a comment from Christopher Jenseth. Words mean nothing without proper definition. So this is, I think this is relevant to text because sometimes words are just kind of reused. Dawn and I went through this with Clubhouse a couple of weeks ago. Houses, rooms. I mean,
clubs, yeah. Yeah, it's like, what are we doing right now?
They're all the same thing. They're just an audio chat room, but they all have 3 different names to make it sound cooler.
Oh, and Mike, you'll love it. Now they're saying they're a podcast.
Okay, nice to know. I do want to dive into some of the technical stuff on the liquid neural networks here. One of the things that might affect regulation, as far as I know, at least 2 years ago, the FAA would not stamp put a rubber stamp on any machine learning model that was actively learning. So that might be an inhibitor for this technology, except though the FAA does open the airspace for the exact use case you were talking about, disaster response. So not that the rules go out the window, it's just that the rules become more flexible because we understand the goal right now is to save lives and infrastructure post-disaster. So I think that's probably going to be one of the first places you actually will see that. So I think that was good insight, Casey. The other thing Yulia brought up is like, how fast will it get to market? Well, the model is just software, and we know these drones can handle machine learning algorithms on board and computer vision on board. We've worked with enablers like modal AI, which makes the technology for that processing to be able to be powered locally and not put up to the cloud. So yeah, I guess they just got to find a product to slap this into. I think the bigger question for them is, can they create a moat around this technology where it's actually worthwhile for investors, or is it just going to be absorbed into current companies as something they could just take from your research paper? We're going to take a quick break. We want to thank our sponsors, SAIC, DroneUp, Rubric Law, and FIXAR. So thank you so much for making this episode possible. Next article is Yulia's. So 13 VCs talk about the state of robotics. So I love robots. Tell us a little bit about what VCs think about robots.
Right, exactly. So we are all here united with the robotic topic, right? So that's why I actually picked it, and having my background in the VC world, this TechCrunch piece took my attention since, as you said, it discusses the current state and the future prospects of robotics from the top venture capitals in this field. So basically it gives the insights into challenges and at the same time opportunities and trends in the industry. And as FIXAR is a robotic company, I definitely keep an eye on what's going on. So what I liked about these insights from the 13 venture capitalists is they gave the comprehensive overview of the range of robotics. So impact of pandemic, the potential for robotics to address climate change, and the role of the robotics in the service sector. And they say that actually, while pandemic initially led to increased investments in the robotics industry, the subsequent economic slowdown and recent bank collapses have slowed investments. And that for sure influenced the robotic development. Despite this, robotics remains vibrant and promising, and investors remain quite optimistic about the industry's exponential growth potential. So what investors are looking for now? They're looking for more robotic startups in the categories like home, healthcare, where there is need for a general purpose robot that supports kitchen tasks, different homework stuff, because of the growing and aging global population. one interesting fact I found out in this article is, I actually never thought about this, but the average robot per 10,000 workers globally is only 141 based on the International Federal Robotics. And in the US, we are at actually above average, 244. But there are 6 countries that ahead of the US. They're China, and number 1 is South Korea. They have 1,000 robots per 10,000 workers. And actually, yeah, so that's kind of fun fact, what is great for us and for the robotic companies. Also, they touched this topic about the government support, and in particularly the DARPA programs. Actually, like a small input from my side here is, now I guess we see the different trend, and a lot of the like opinion leaders highlight this trend. When the security and defense programs call for the innovations that can be adopted by the security and defense industry. So NATO recently announced the NATO Diana Business Accelerator, classical business accelerator for the startups. So they wanted to see what is there for them in healthcare, cybersecurity, drone, autonomy space. So all these government programs just warm up the interest and potential of the robotics companies. So overall, that's a great outcome, because there is huge appetite on the investment market for the robotics in the very broad sense. Also on commercial side, what was interesting is they are discussing the pretty new business model for the robotics. That's the robotics as a service instead of software as a service. So how it works is, well, they outline that there is no like ideal case for this. They just try how it can work for the different robotics companies. But the vision is, when you develop some customized, let's say, module for the particular customer, and then you sell the whole system on the subscription model. So that brings the recurring revenue to the company. That brings more, let's say, validation for the investors to come in and be a part of this deal, of this technology. So a lot of thoughts from the technical perspective, industries, business model were touched on this topic, so I liked it a lot. Curious what you think about this.
Well, just real quick, I want to bring in some stuff from the chat. So we got our friend Pramod, who's actually on one of our shows. What was it, 2 weeks ago? Or yeah, I think so. Flying robots are the coolest, and that's a biased view in parentheses. And also we have a comment from Alfredo. I've never seen you before, so welcome to the crew. Hello from Argentina. Congrats. There's so many uses on AI, UAS. Usages over the industry. We understand the issue is how to make data flow to decisions makers, and if you do it the right sensor and process on the edge, the necessity will take it to the market ASAP. Okay, Casey. So what's your thought on the 13 VCs?
I mean, I think it's terribly interesting, and I'm so happy that Yulia shared it. I mean, we like that one point that mainstream robots are closer than you think. I mean, I have 2 robo vacuums in my house that turn on at the most inconvenient times, and then I have to rescue them from underneath the couch. But they're getting better, right? So it's already happening. We already have flying robots, as what was said in the chat, which I am a drone nerd myself, so I super enjoy, all the things that you can do with FPV and cameras. But as we're moving into more security uses of drones and more commercialized uses, it's only going to get better from here. And one thing that I see from a limitation standpoint is there's a lot of drones being produced with specific use cases in mind, which is great. I love that. But from an investment model for a company, they would like one drone that does a lot of things for them, rather than 7 drones that all have unique functions, right? So I want one that checks my fence line. I want one that goes after an intruder. I want one that does this. So you want one to do many things, and that takes onboard processing power, takes more memory, takes more sensors, takes a lot more to that. So I think it's phenomenal that the investments are there and they're starting to pick up, and that there's a lot of positive outlooks for the robotics industry.
Yeah, I've seen things in the last year in the robotics field which feel like these were barriers that took forever to push past. One of which, folding laundry, surprisingly hard for robots. But also, I saw two little robots playing soccer yesterday on LinkedIn. And they were effective at goaltending. When they fell down, they got back up, whether they fell on their back or their front. They did like kind of flying kicks to make a goal past the other one. So that level of bipedal kind of dexterity it just wasn't around a year ago. And I think that's going to push things very, very far. So whether it's actual, finger dexterity or armature dexterity, or being able to actually walk around like a biped or a quadruped in different environments. We just in New York, we had a parking garage collapse, and I think it was a Boston Dynamics spot that actually helped kind of get through the rubble safely so that we didn't have to risk the lives of our fire servicemen. Don, what's your take?
Well, there's a lot of great things in this article. So again, thanks, Yulia, for sharing this. One thing I always talk about, having come from the public sector, like Casey, former FBI agent, I was in the United States Air Force. This idea that public sector funding really does boost innovation and technology. And your DARPA example and the one in this article, I think, is an excellent example. In fact, Modal AI, the company Mike mentioned, has been involved in several DARPA projects to help with their, Voxel family of autopilots and kind of prove out those concepts that they have. This idea of robots as a service, I think, is really interesting because everybody is like blank as a service now, right? Like, sensors as a service, security as a service. So you're just seeing more and more of this, and it probably from a business standpoint makes sense to be able to kind of buy a subscription to something instead of taking an entire network or an entire fleet of multiple different drones or whatever we're talking about on board into your company. If you can subscribe to something, the other company helps you do it, they maintain it, things like this. I think it makes a lot of sense that people are going in that direction. And I do think it's going to help this robotics industry having those kind of interesting financial and other service models. The climate change, the cleaner trash recycling, all the different uses for robotics, so interesting. And the last thing I'll say about this article is, I as much as COVID impacted everybody in such a negative way, what we did see was, let's just call it the rise of the machines. Because when people were locked in their houses for 2 years, and they needed medicine or they needed groceries, or those non-essential workers were forced to stay home, but those tasks still needed to be done. This article really reinforced that. Like, I was aware of it in the drone industry, right? Because that's kind of where Mike and I live and dwell quite a bit. But yes, it makes sense that like in every facet of robotics, that COVID also gave those technologies a boost, if you will, because they are taking over these menial tasks, things like laundry folding that now robots can actually do. So really, really cool stuff. Great article.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and Dawn, on that point, it's not just disease prevention and risk control for individuals. It's also understanding supply chain, right? So you can't, at some point, raw materials can't be manufactured out of thin air. So you do need access to raw materials. But, the commoditization of robotics technology and how it's gotten so much better, actually pushing that forward and allowing us to create kind of micro factories whenever the need arises, I think is something that could alleviate whatever the next worldwide disaster is that breaks up the supply chain. Because we had an extremely efficient global kind of logistics matrix that couldn't handle that pressure. You know, it,
Oh yeah.
and we're kind of still, well, finally getting past, I think, the fallout of that now. But we need to kind of future-proof ourselves, as we know. Yulia, any final insights before we move on to Dawn's article?
Oh yeah, well, I actually liked how you, Casey, summarized this about speaking about scalability. Basically, that's what investors definitely like. Instead of, let's say, speaking about drones, instead of building the whole fleet of the different drones and sending you people for the different trainings and maintain them in the different order, taking care about all the contractors, etc., you can have one that serves multiple industries and applications. Simply swap the sensor and send it today for the disaster relief efforts and tomorrow for some search and rescue missions or border control, delivery missions, etc. So I definitely like this message, and I believe, it's actually outcome from this article as well. Everyone wants to have something that is scalable. And yeah, that's definitely how they get the better ROI and better performance for their portfolio and better value for the company itself.
All right. So actually, we're not going to leave robots quite yet. So Dawn, you brought up this article specifically on humanoid robots. So talk to us about the rise of the humanoids.
Well, you were just talking, Mike, about bipedals, that are playing soccer on the internet and how far we've come. And this was a really interesting article summarizing a market report from The Brainy Insights. And I'm going to throw out some fun facts and statistics here because it really sets the stage for what we're talking about when we talk about humanoid robotics that, frankly, not many of us have seen, right? We've seen drones. We've seen, those, Roomba, iRobot, vacuum cleaners, and even Teslas that are not quite a robot yet, but although they want it to be completely autonomous. So these bipedal humanoid robots, the market could grow from 1.6 billion US today, actually to about 214.4 billion by 2032. The biggest market, I think, who just alluded to South Korea? Was that you, Casey?
Right.
Was that Julia?
Yes, I guess I mentioned, so they're now in the first place of adopting the robots. So they
Yes.
have
Okay. So
thousands.
that's exactly right. This article talks about how the Asia Pacific region is the largest market for robots, 35.8% share of the 2022 market revenue, with a massive demand they're seeing in India, China, not surprising, right? Huge populations, and Japan. In fact, I think India just surpassed China in its population size. But what's important about those populations, what's relevant, is they are aging. And that is driving a need for additional robotics to help with all kinds of things, including what we're seeing is a huge demand in healthcare. And things like not only security around hospitals, but things like dispensing pharmaceuticals, or we've seen delivering medicines and bringing food to people, things like this. So lots of discussion about supply chain in this piece. Really cool list at the end of a whole bunch of companies, and they're really amazing. Bipedal robots, one of the ones they call out is a South Korean company, DST Robot Company. What I found interesting, and then I'm going to hand it over to you guys, is there are car companies investing in this humanoid robotic space. Like, to me, so we see this, right, in advanced air mobility. We see Hyundai that spun off Supernal for the eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, and kind of urban air mobility, these short flights across cities and whatnot. Well, here we have Honda. The Honda Motor Company has this robot called Asimo, where their vision is that these machines would live alongside people to serve their needs. A bipedal autonomous humanoid with human control, multi-fingered uses and object recognition technology, tactile and visual senses that can even do things like pick up bottles and twist off caps. So you could see where there's an elderly population that needs help, have a little humanoid, now we're really talking Jetsons, right? Because they had a robot that was like that little maid, right? That ran around cleaning the house. And then the other one is Toyota Motor Company has the WeWalk WW2000 robot. They unveiled this thing in 2019. I love this use case. It gives me chills, honestly, being a veteran myself. To support people undergoing rehabilitation for lower limb paralysis that was either brought on by a stroke or other causes. So again, two car companies, where you think of as car companies, most people, investing in Yulia, the VC side, the money's going here to humanoid robots. So really cool stuff, really neat videos in here of the Amica by Engineered Arts, where you see this robot that looks like a woman talking and answering in like 4 different languages, dynamically to different questions. So super, super cool stuff. So I'll stop talking now, and Mike, you go around the room.
Yeah, so I'm actually not surprised that Honda and Toyota are into it, because I imagine they build their own factory robots, make them custom to tasks.
Good point.
Also, Honda has actually been making humanoid robots they've kind of been the first one to really push it. I think Asimo is a sequel to Osmo, if I remember correctly. It might be a Mandela effect there, but yeah. Also, both companies you mentioned are Japanese. There tends to be a favoritism more in Japan than other countries towards humanoid robots. That's definitely like a cultural kind of hallmark that, in fact, actually some roboticists don't think is necessary. So the question whenever you're building a humanoid robot is, does it have to be humanoid? Can it be better served by something like just a mechanical arm that's in the room, or in the case of, I think you mentioned medication dispensing, like what's wrong with the vending machine in that case? So when do you need a humanoid robot? That's kind of always the question that has to be answered. I think the thing that's been the largest barrier to even being able to answer that functionally is we don't really have a lot of functional humanoid robots. Most of them were kind of garbage and couldn't walk until now. So I think that changes when they actually can walk around in space the same way that we do, and articulate themselves in the same way that we do. So what's everybody else's thoughts? Who wants to go first?
I'll pop in. So it's interesting seeing car manufacturers in this space, but I also find it interesting that Yamaha does pianos, audio receivers, and motorcycles.
That's
right?
true. That's true.
Japanese Zaibatsu, yeah.
Yeah,
They do everything.
Yeah. So,
Sony's a real estate company.
Yeah. Toyota is really interesting. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Toyota started out as a loom manufacturer back in the late 1800s.
Of a what?
So a loom manufacturer, LOOM. So taking raw material and turning it into cloth. So I had the opportunity, I visited Japan in 2017 and went to the Toyota Museum of Commemorative Technology or something like that. But it was basically the history of Toyota and how they started as a loom manufacturer and then got into vehicles in the 1930s and how that went through that process. And I got to see some of their manufacturing floor because they had different parts in there. Really impressive stuff. But this, like them getting into the support robots, and that is a huge step forward, because not only for people who have limb paralysis or strokes or combat veterans, the more that we can use robots to help people age better, whether that's an exosuit that helps somebody who's working on a loading dock load trucks, right? Something that takes that burden off of their body, because that hurts them in the long run and makes for a painful retirement. So let's make that as easy as possible for people. So the support robots, I think, are a huge, huge part of kind of the advancement of us as humans and us as society.
Absolutely. And I think these Asian countries are thinking of it maybe faster than us, because they are facing aging populations. And let's face it, in the United States, I look around, and once people reach a certain age, like we just push them off to the side or put them in homes. And it's hard, and I understand why. In some cases, it's very hard to take care of an aging person as their health declines. And any assistance you could help give to caregivers too in that situation. I think that's probably the most human thing you can do with a robot. So hopefully we'll see some advancements there. Yulia, final words, and then we kind of got to get moving on to the next thing today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want actually to continue this topic about the healthcare recovery and help of the robots. So about 7 years ago already, I've been to Singapore. So what they did, actually, it was fascinating for me, especially that many years ago. So they created a government program to develop the technology that can be of help for the health recovery after strokes, after surgeries, paralysis, etc. So what they did basically, in the very center of the Singapore, they in the shopping center, they created kind of museum, kind of showroom, museum, to invite people who basically visit shopping center. And they invited them there to showcase what is possible already and what the government is working on, showing that, hey, in a couple of years, you will be assisted by the robots to cross the road, and that's how it should work. And then you go to the next room, and you're in the like model house, let's say, and the different types of robots, they show how you can be assisted with the different, I don't know, to recover after the strokes, to develop your movements on, and how the robots can bring you something to help you out, etc., etc. So they split all the showroom or museum into different spaces. What is possible in the street, what is possible at home, in the business environment, etc. That was completely new, and we never saw something like that many years ago. So it seems like things are evolving, and definitely that's the trend. So just love what's going on, and hope to see more of this type of robots to help society.
Yeah, it's certainly exciting to see things that were dreams for a lot of years and felt half-baked actually materialize into functional use cases. And, you know, something you said about the crosswalk just kind of inspired me to think about this a little bit differently. So that's a UI thing, right? We're used to a person being there in the crosswalk. We respond to that really well. And one of the worst parts about technology is when it forces us to adapt to a UI that doesn't make sense to the way our normal human, systems are built to react, like eye contact, etc. So there might be a great future for robots in those situations. One last comment, and then I'm going to call to Dawn to close down the show. So Singapore is creating a whole digital twin of their country through LiDAR. Ooh, that's interesting. Tech on mobile device. Imagine the implication of having every centimeter of your country digitized. Well, I'm sure you could run a lot of simulations for almost everything from disaster response to traffic flow. So that is very exciting. Dawn, so we got a lot coming up, not only this week, but next week. You want to tell the audience about it?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a ton going on. So this week on the Dawn of Drones, we have UV Avionics, Britt Wanick. We're kicking off a brand new month. Today is the 1st of May, everybody. Can you believe it? And we'll be dedicating this month on the Dawn of Drones to autonomy reimagined. And then Thursday, we've got Black Swift Technologies on the Drone Law Connections Clubhouse at 1 p.m. Eastern. So check that out. Really exciting, everybody. AUVSI Exponential is coming up. So most of us will be traveling over the weekend and heading to Denver, Colorado, which is right here in my neck of the woods. I'm super excited to have this show be in my backyard, in my home state. And Yulia, FIXAR is going to be there in full force. You guys have a booth there?
Yes, that's the booth number 4840. So everyone is very welcome to come and to see what we have. We also will have the demonstration. So more news are on our website. So everyone is very welcome to join us.
Very good. And I know Aerovigilance and Counter UAS Hub is going to be out there too. Tom Adams, Casey, your partner, will be there. In fact, Tom is on a security panel for our second annual Law Tech Connect workshop. Mike will be with me. We will be taping those panels, but please sign up if you haven't yet. It's on Monday, May 8th, from like about 8 o'clock to 5 p.m. And we're having a pre-networking event Sunday evening from 7 to 9 at the Urban Putt. So please join us. It's going to be amazing, a great way to kick off the week. And then, of course, if you haven't signed up for Rocky Mountain AUVSI's kickoff party later Monday night, do that. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah,
oh,
I'm
and
really
Mike, you want to mention our full crew live from the floor?
Yes, on Tuesday, we're going to be doing a special broadcast live from the floor. We've got a ton of guests. We'll be releasing some social media about who's going to be guest starring. We've done this at every big drone event, and it's always a huge hit because you're going to get basically everybody who's important to us anyway, insights on what's going on at the event. So be sure to tune into that. And then also we've got Jack Elston on Wednesday on Dawn of Drones. So Jack is awesome. I met him actually before I met Dawn. And his tech has actually, I think, made it to Venus or Mercury. Which one's hotter? Whatever one's hotter, it's been there.
Yeah.
So really cool company, Black Swift Technologies. And anything else, Don?
Yeah, one other thing I forgot.
Final comments coming
I've got
in
an
too.
important thing this week too. Something that we don't normally do. So this is going to be a worldwide premiere for Doodle Labs. They make the smart mesh Helix radio, and that's a blue UAS component. That's going to be this Thursday after our clubhouse at 3 p.m. Eastern, streaming across all the usual suspect channels. And then Doodle will be on our clubhouse live also from AUVSI next Thursday. So again, a ton going on between this and next week.
Yeah, that'll be an awesome preview if you're going to the show, kind of warm you up to what's going on at Doodle. So final comments from the chat. I want to say hi to Rotor Dynamics Corp, who said howdy from Greenville SCI, super interesting. And Shannon, Don, we have a lot of fans, a lot of repeat customers.
So many people are dialing in regularly to the show.
Yeah.
I'm glad people are enjoying it. So spread the
we
word,
appreciate
tell your
it.
friends.
Yeah. So good morning, all. Q for you, Yulia. Seems like VC and DoD appetite has moved from UAVs carrying more and flying farther to AI and more advanced add-ons, yet we still have serious limitations to the most basic capabilities of drones. Do you see VCs returning to the basics in the future, like propulsion tech? Well, we have to get going, so Yulia will talk with you on LinkedIn, Shannon. We'll be sure to send over her profile if she can't find it. And yeah, that's it. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up next week and this week. I'll see you at AUVSI at Exponential with Dawn. I'm going to be there with my friends from Drone Code. It's going to be a fun show. Can't wait to see all of you. We are out here.